Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. Happy Wednesday to all of you out there as we get going on another crowded edition of All Access AM. We'll have Conor O'Neill join us at 8:30 a.m. Central Time. Covers Duke and Wake Forest for On3 and Rivals.com. He will break down the Blue Devils and the Demon Deacons, how they do in the transfer portal. We know the big storyline around the Demon Deacons. Who is Walter Egad? What does he bring? He got his waiver approved. What does that mean for the quarterback position of Duke? We'll also look at Wake Forest. They lost a ton off of this historic Wake team. Conor joins us again to talk about that and break it all down for us on All Access AM. And we are appreciative of you guys who continue to tune in with us. We've got a lot of fun things planned for you guys as we continue with the lead up to March Madness. And of course, the lead up to spring ball across the ACC world, which does span, of course, coast to coast. And we'll break down a lot of these teams. Working on the Cal Stanford side, it's a little early for the West Coast, even with our 8 a.m. time. And I don't blame them. 6 a.m. to get on camera or the telephone with me here at All Access AM. I would be a little, just kind of maybe hesitant to just do that. You need your rest in this industry. But that said, we haven't gotten anybody just yet on the Cal Stanford side. But we're excited to get them going and hear about Cal and Stanford's first year head coaches as spring approaches. So we're going to get them on later. But we've got Conor today breaking down the Duke Wake Forest side. Make sure you tuned in tomorrow, Thursday, for our show, 8 to 9 a.m. Central, 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern time. We'll have Kelly Quinlan, who covers Georgia Tech, join the show. So we have a lot going on here at All Access AM. And I tell you what, a company that has had a lot going on here in 2026 is OPW Solutions. And OPW Solutions is there for you in your time of need as a business. When the snowstorms hit across America, they were there for the snow and ice control that those businesses needed. And they can handle all of that for you, whether it is the commercial landscaping side of things in the aftermath of that storm, whether it's snow, whether it's rain, whether it's anything that is thrown your way. If you're in the North Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas region, reach out to OPW Solutions and give them a call today. 214-444-2305 or go to opwsolutions.com. It's also that time of year where spring is maybe approaching. What do we have? A month until spring starts. So make sure you've got your pressure washing lined up and your fence maintenance for maybe the ground has thawed out and maybe some things are all wonky there. You need some things repaired. Reach out to our friends at OPW Solutions and they'll get you taken care of. Appreciate you guys who are with us on this Wednesday. Jerry Morphew in the chat. I appreciate you saying, hey, Billy, or hello, Billy. I'm with you today. Well, we appreciate you, Jerry, for listening. Lots on this show to start off with. I do have, here's kind of the pre 8:30 a.m. rundown. We have high school recruiting. We have maybe a little bit of buzz around the basketball transfer portal. We have ACC hoops to get to. We have another lawsuit involving the NCAA and eligibility that pertains to the ACC. So, of course, we've got to talk about that. So much to do on this edition of All Access AM, and we're excited to do it with you guys. So, shall we dive in? Shall we jump in to the wild world that is the ACC? Where do we begin? We even have coaching news, one might say, in the ACC on the hoop side of things. So let's start there. Steve Forbes of Wake Forest is going to return for a 7th season for the Demon Deacons. This coming from our friend Jeff Goodman over at the Field of 68. He reported that John Curry, the athletic director, does have Steve Forbes' back. And this has been a disappointing Wake Forest season. We know that. We know where they stand in the standings. It's not a good situation right now for Wake Forest as a whole. But today's day and age of college basketball, it's really hard to make a move. And it's really hard to make a move when you, as a Wake Forest athletic department, are pouring a lot of money into facilities and that kind of new uh, mixed use area around the athletic, area. You also have a football program that needs more money, needs more resources. And the job that Jake Dickert and company are doing is certainly a good enough reason to give those resources to them. So the question really becomes, do you want to fire a coach that represents, I think for the most part, everything that's good in college basketball? I think Steve Forbes, and following him back from his previous stop at East Tennessee State, you have somebody who was really highly thought of when he got this job and was successful there before heading over to Wake Forest. And it was a big deal when they got him. And now you look at the last 5 or 6 seasons, and it's just not been incredible. They have had their moments of 20-win seasons. They've been in the NIT. They were going to go to the NCAA tournament before COVID canceled that. But it it hasn't been the success that I think anybody has really wanted at Wake Forest, but they're going to give it, I would say, another year here for Steve Forbes. They're 14-13 overall. They're 5-9 in ACC play. They're a long shot as far as, or they're a long way back from any sort of competitive standing in the ACC. And I think that they're a program that's got to make a decision as to whether they want to get back to some of the historic heights that they've had in moments over their past run. Of course, obviously Chris Paul days and things like that. But Wake Forest, just with where it is in the revenue sharing era of college basketball, and we'll kind of segue this into what Steve Forbes and his staff probably need to be doing right now. But you just don't see a world where Wake Forest, with their limited resources, can get to that next level and be competitive again. And maybe they can take that step up here and there, and maybe they can get to the NIT, and they can get back to some of those 20-win seasons. But in an ACC that saw so many schools double down, and if you look at the top of the standings and you see Miami and you see NC State, you see UNC, you see Louisville, Clemson, SMU, and others, you have schools that are investing and putting forth the resources. Florida State, until last night, has been on quite the run, and they've got a new coaching staff. You have a lot of programs that are working on putting things together that are going to keep you in the bottom half of this league. And so it's really a tough situation for Steve Forbes to be in. But I think the way he represents that program, that school, and the effort level he puts in, it doesn't necessarily always mean you deserve to be back, but it makes a lot of sense as to what John Curry's thinking is. There's been blips in his tenure that, when given the resources in today's day and age, maybe makes you believe that they'll be in position to make some noise in the ACC at one point. But it's going to be a long road. But it starts with pre-portaling. And I bring that up because our own Joe Tipton of on3andrivals.com did release a report talking with some ACC GMs, some ACC coaches and assistant coaches. He released this earlier this week on Tuesday, and talking about where the portal is going in college basketball. And it's so different in a sense from football, because college basketball's season ends with the end of March Madness, the NCAA tournament, and the next day that portal is open. And with football, you get down to a couple teams here or there, and then the portal opens in the college football playoff after the quarterfinals are played. And for basketball, you don't have as much of a lead up. You have a few weeks or whatever. You have some time as a coaching staff if you're not in March Madness, or if you're balancing it with the NIT, or if you're not in postseason play at all. But there's a different feeling around the college basketball transfer portal environment that is there. And Joe Tipton kind of gave a little bit of the background on this and how coaches are talking to high school coaches, or talking to agents, or talking around players to find out, hey, are they going to enter the portal? Are they going to make a move? Are they returning? How are they feeling? Can we start talking numbers? And right around this time of year, while teams are pushing for their postseason play, they're pushing for their seeding in their conference tournament. Now is that unfortunate time where the leadership of a college basketball program is having to go out and go into contract talks. And so here we are again, another situation where the college calendar of these contracts of where the sport is just sucks, right? And this goes back to, and one ACC coach made a point here, you start this in November in some cases. You start seeing who plays a lot early in the season versus who doesn't, but who was maybe on your radar, who was maybe on your radar as somebody who could be in position for a fresh start that might make a lot of sense for your team. And he said, quote, this ACC coach said, agents are going to do what's best for their clients. Clients do what's best for themselves, and schools fall in line so they don't fall behind. And for Steve Forbes and his staff, they've got to be looking at where they've been for the last month and a half, in particular of ACC play, knowing they're out of it, knowing they're out of postseason contention, and they should be working on what their next roster is. When you look at the numbers that are being thrown around, it's insane. And college basketball, though, I think has always been, I think football has kind of been more cloak and dagger, but I think the way college basketball works with even when you see commitments from high school players, it's according to a source, it's according to a this and that. And it's just always so kind of secretive in a way. And I love that about college basketball. I think that it, it's a very clear environment of what to play in. Like prospects and transfers aren't ever going to be upset about a source breaking something to a reporter. It is that very particular set of timelines that you're going to see kids take visits, set their decision date, announce their decision, and you're generally going to have a good feel of where they're going because there's almost like there's 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 no respect among thieves in a sense with the transfer portal, but there is some respect about high school recruiting still. And when kids commit and shut things down, that generally it stays that way. And I do like that and appreciate that about college basketball. But in this world of the transfer portal, this has changed the game from the standpoint of you have to be working on your next roster. You have to be working on the future of your program and where it's going. And so I thought it was an interesting timing that Wake Forest, kind of leaked to, or I assume Wake Forest leaked to Jeff Goodman that Steve Forbes was coming back. That piece had ran the day before, and you get a feel for, okay, this is the expectation. This is how things are going in today's day and age of college basketball. It's again unfortunate because guys should be focusing on postseason or what have you, but they're also having to focus on what's next for them and what their agents are saying, because all these guys for the most part have agents. So it's a fascinating world we live in, and I think it continues to give us so many storylines to watch. And whether it be the transfer portal or whether it be suing for another year of eligibility, which is what Chandler Morris is doing. Virginia quarterback Chandler Morris has filed a lawsuit against the NCAA claiming he should get a seventh season of college football. And for the record, I actually don't mind this too much. And 3 years of college football being played by him, plus a 22 snap season that is, was kind of riddled with a mental health thing and some of the things like that he went through that year is his claim to that fourth season of playing. He's been through some injuries. He's been through some adversity. I don't mind him at least going after this because truthfully, Chandler Morris he's just not going to play in the NFL. So I don't blame him. He's got the means, he's got the resources to go after this. So go for it. I don't mind him doing this. I don't mind any of these players trying to do this. What I mind is certain situations that are very kind of cut and dry of this guy's out of eligibility or it doesn't make sense. I think that's where I kind of draw the line. I could see a world where Chandler Morris has something to stand on in this respect, but it wouldn't shock me if the NCAA continues to fight and continues to play the hard ball to keep him from playing this seventh year of college athletics. And we'll see. This could be a really interesting thing to watch if it does get approved, because if he does get approved, does that mean that he is back at UVA, which signed Bo Pribula, right? Everybody remembers that, bringing in Missouri quarterback Bo Pribula. And then they end up getting Eli Holstein as well, which makes things, of course, interesting with the competition there. But Chandler Morris's father, Chad Morris, is now the Clemson offensive coordinator. Could a return happen with the Tigers? That'll be something we're watching if this does get approved. So, best of luck to Chandler Morris. I think he represents a lot of good things about college football, despite how many different places he's been. He has just been dealt, I feel like, so many uh, poor situations as far as where he's ended up, whether it be starting his career at Oklahoma, which I think was a level too high for him, maybe. And I believe he was stuck behind somebody pretty good there. I forget, one of the Heisman Trophy winners, maybe Caleb Williams, probably, if my timeline's right. Moves to TCU. Max Duggan replaces him when he gets injured in that 2022 season early on, and loses that job to Max Duggan, who leads him to a national championship game appearance. Okay, that doesn't work out. He goes to North Texas to restart things. That works. Then he goes to UVA to finish things out. But he's always done it with kind of the right intent, and he's kind of followed his people in a sense, or people that he's familiar with. So there's a lot of the transfer that you don't like in today's day and age, but quarterbacks are different, and sometimes you get dealt a crappy hand of cards, and he finally broke through at a major college football level with a really cool moment, I think, for him and at UVA. So we'll see if he is back, but he did file the lawsuit this week, so keep an eye on that. Speaking of quarterbacks, as we continue to jump around here, if you haven't noticed in this first half of the show, but I always like when ACC fans, if you're tuning into our podcast for the first time or our show live, you get a feeling that we're going to hit just about everything that is newsy. We're kind of, if we're not daily, we're designed not to be daily, but 3 times a week where we give you the news and we feel like we cover just about everything, even if it's a passing glance. But this one is going to hit in the feels of a lot of lifelong ACC fans, because 2027 quarterback Gunnar Rivers, yes, Philip Rivers' son, has committed to NC State. He is the son of the former NFL star and future Hall of Famer, and he is going to be taking his talents to the Wolfpack, where his father played back in 2000. And Gunnar picked NC State over the likes of Auburn, Georgia, Miami, Boston College, and more. He's really kept his recruiting on the down low, but ended up committing early in this 2026 year to start a jump start on recruiting the 2027 class. This spring, this summer, official visits will be happening there for the Wolfpack, and Gunnar Rivers can now lead that. And last year, he completed 208 of 290 passes, which is good for 72% completion percentage, 2,800 yards, 44 touchdowns, 5 picks. Really impressive record at St. Michael Catholic. That went 13-1 and played for a state championship last year. He's a big kid, 6'3", 200 pounds as well. Ranks as a number 117th overall prospect, number 12 quarterback nationally. And he's out of the state of Alabama, of course, in Fairhope. So a big pickup for Dave Doeren, getting a legacy, getting somebody that is going to certainly hit home with the fans and make a potential big impact down the line, as one day, of course, CJ Bailey is going to move on from NC State, and the future of NC State football could be in Gunnar Rivers. What a story that would be, as we'll follow that. NC State in recruiting wasn't done making waves, and another ACC school is certainly in the mix for this elite prospect as well, as we go to the basketball side. And news came out on Tuesday that Ryan Hampton, the 2027, maybe as of now, 5-star shooting guard out of the state of Florida at DME Academy, has 4 official visits locked in. NC State is going to lead things off with Ole Miss right after that. NC State getting him March 2nd, Ole Miss March 3rd, then SMU March 4th, and Nebraska March 8th. SMU is where his father, Roderick Hampton, played his college ball and played very well for the Mustangs. And he's been a top target for SMU, having played for Dynamic Prep, where current SMU freshman Jaden Toombs and Jermaine O'Neill Jr. played their high school basketball, and he's from the Rockwall area. His older brother is RJ Hampton, a former first-round pick. Ryan Hampton, another one in the Hampton bloodlines, coming up now and sits as the number 3 overall prospect in the country, the number 1 ranked shooting guard. Will he end up playing his college basketball in the ACC? Hey, Will Wade, SMU, battling it out. Will Wade versus Andy Enfield battling it out. You can't really sleep on either one of those teams throwing around some money to get a 5-star prospect, and particularly one that both programs have familiarity with. But there's also Ole Miss. There's also Nebraska. It'll be a really interesting recruiting, week or so to follow, as those official visits will go back to back to back to back to back. So Ryan Hampton sets those official visits. We do like to mix in some recruiting talk when the news is big enough, and that certainly caught my eye for you guys as it rolled across the ticker on Tuesday on my timeline. Before we get into breaking down what was an interesting couple days of ACC hoops, I do want to remind you guys that we are presented by the La La Land Foundation as well. La La Land Foundation is just an incredible organization that I hope that so many of you can get involved with and spend some time learning more about. The La La Land Foundation is all about normalizing kindness, and they do that in many different ways, many different avenues. But the La La Land Foundation is built on, giving the youth that are transitioning from foster care into adulthood an opportunity, and an opportunity to be as successful as they could possibly be by giving them the tools to succeed and the confidence to succeed. And they do that through many different avenues to give and support the foundation. You can do it through in-kind donations. You can do it through, partnering as a corporate sponsor. You can give money. You can give your time. You can give mentorship. And you can find out all of those ways to volunteer or support at lalalandfoundation.com. It's an extension of the La La Land Kind Cafe, which, if you've never been to one, please go check one out, see what they're all about. They do an incredible job making great coffee and giving you an incredible experience there in any of their stores. But the La La Land Foundation is something that we're really proud to be partnered with. They do an incredible job supporting the future of America with their support of foster youth growing into adulthood and how to transition successfully into that next big step. So, and they do it all through kindness and normalizing that kindness. So appreciate La La Land Foundation for all of their support of us at All Access AM. Look, we do have some ACC hoops to get to. We, again, will be joined by Conor O'Neill, who covers Duke and Wake Forest here in just a little bit. But let's fly through some ACC, basketball recap from earlier this week. Duke continues to sit atop the standings. Tuesday night, they beat Notre Dame 156 in a dominant performance. Cam Boozer with a double-double. Once again, 24 points, 13 boards. In this one, very interesting here, Micah Shrewsbury, a really, really bad night for him, as he did injure his Achilles. There wasn't exact reporting that it was ruptured or anything like that. I haven't seen that as of this morning, but he was in a walking boot on the bench, but he was helped to the locker room at halftime and did confirm at least that there was an injury. And he just said, quote, "I don't really want to get into it now," in the post-game press conference. It's like the season of hell continues. And so we feel for Micah Shrewsbury. Duke, again, blew the doors off of Notre Dame in that one Tuesday night. Notre Dame now 12-16 overall, 3-12 in ACC play, and the hits keep coming for Notre Dame. Let's now go back to Monday night. North Carolina, without Caleb Wilson, gets a really, really big win over Louisville, 77-74 at home. UNC, I believe, pretty much led the entire way in this one, but a really good basketball game, really impressive performance by Seth Trimble. He had 30 in this one. Michael Brown had another 24 points as he continues to play at a high level. UNC gets a key win here, 22-6 overall, 10-5 in ACC play. Louisville sits at 20-8 overall, 9-6 in ACC play. This was a big seeding game for the ACC tournament as well. If you look at the current projected, um, seeding now, UNC now sits in the 5 seed. They were 7th, I believe, before that win over Louisville. So a little bit of clarity may be coming to the seeding. They're above Clemson because of that win that UNC has over Duke. If Duke does beat UNC in the final game of the regular season, I don't know what that does to that tiebreaker, if it changes it at all. But that is something to keep an eye on. I guess they would still have the win over Duke from earlier in the season. So my guess is that they'd still be above Clemson if they were still at the same record. But that's what currently has UNC over Clemson, who is the 6th seed. Louisville's now the 7th seed. SMU at the 8th seed right now. And a very critical opportunity here for SMU to get back to even, I believe, here with Louisville and jump them, because SMU plays at Cal Wednesday night. So keep an eye on that game and how that might impact seeding in the ACC tournament. That was a big game for Louisville in that regard. Both teams still squarely in the NCAA tournament, but a really high-level basketball game Monday night in Chapel Hill. Speaking of high level, the Virginia Cavaliers, their play Tuesday night against NC State, in particular the first half defensively, they held NC State to 19 points in the first half as they led 32-19. And then both teams decided they were going to have to really duke it out on the score sheet. And UVA scored 58 points in the second half, NC State 42. Tyus DeRitter, 19 points on his night. Paul McNeil Jr., 22 to lead all scorers there for NC State. And, for this one, this is a game that was, I feel like, I no surprise, Will Wade unhappy with how his team played offensively in the first half, but you were still in it. You were still within striking distance, and you felt like if you can get the offense going just a bit, you could find a way to sneak into Charlottesville and get a win. And instead, then your defensive play just completely falls apart in the second half. 58 second half points given up to UVA. They really showed just how balanced they can be, how they can score in so many different ways. They shot 53% from the field. NC State, 29% from the field. Just a really disappointing game for them as a whole offensively. And they weren't able to really do much of anything offensively against UVA. But that's how UVA gets you. I just was a little surprised to see UVA's offense take off the way it did in the second half. I know NC State could be Jekyll and Hyde, as they now sit at 19-9 overall, and they sit at 10-5 in league play. UVA now 25-3, 13-2 in ACC play. But just a really interesting game to watch that one go down, and just see how UVA was able to be versatile enough to say, okay, all right, we'll let you have a little bit more offensively in the second half, but watch this. We're going to go and just shoot the lights out and shoot 53%, 46% from three-point range. And just a really impressive effort offensively from UVA to get that one done. Tuesday night also, Miami did get another win, 83-73 at FSU. Really impressive road win for Miami with the way Florida State's been playing. Miami now 22-6 overall, 11-4 in ACC play as they continue their march to the NCAA tournament. FSU 14-14 overall, 7-8 in league play. They're still very dangerous, but Malik Reneau, too much. His double-double, 23 points, 12 rebounds for the Hurricanes. And FSU just kind of gets brought back down just a little bit there with that loss Tuesday night. So without any further ado, we do want to bring in our next guest, and it is a return to the program for our friend Conor O'Neill. Conor, good to see you on this Wednesday morning. How are you? Do we have you, Conor?
Yeah, a little scratchy here.
Okay. Well, Conor, first of all, Duke flexes its muscles over Notre Dame Tuesday night. Just what were your quick takeaways from that game?
By halftime, I was ready to fast forward to Saturday and the game against Virginia. I mean, Notre Dame's in a really bad spot without Marcus Burton, and they haven't had Marcus Burton in a while. But then you also remove Jalen Harrelson. They haven't had Keba Njai in about a month. I'm sure they're dangerous if they can make shots. Duke is a terrible matchup because Duke is really, really valuable, really versatile defensively. They can pinpoint where you're going to try to score on them and take that away. And I think that's just going to be too much for Notre Dame when they're already offensively challenged.
Let's get over to the football side of things for Duke, though, because there's plenty to keep us busy with Darian Mensah departing for Miami with Cooper Barkate in his luggage, so to speak, and kind of making out like bandits there. Look, the portal is a mess. We know that. It was an entire thing. It's been covered. Let's focus on what Duke has been able to do through the transfer portal. Let's, in particular, though, look at Walter Eget. Big news, his waiver approved. The San Jose State transfer quarterback. Duke was able to get somebody late here. I don't know if they're going to have the Darian Mensah type of season from him, but they did get help at the quarterback position. What's it mean for that room and Johnny Brewer?
Yeah, I mean, it's better than the alternative, which the alternative after Darian Mensah left was a kind of journeyman quarterback, Ari Patu, who had been at Stanford and started like a game there and then was at North Alabama for the last 2 years and was a part-time starter with some injury history. And then a redshirt freshman in Dan Mahan, who did not take a snap last year, or a incoming freshman, Terry Walker III, who blew out his ACL in September and might not even be ready for fall camp or even the season. So they had to do something. Walker Eget was kind of quote unquote the best available option. And you go back and forth on the definition of available because he had to get the waiver approved. Like there wasn't anything on the surface that said he was even going to be able to play until Duke brought him in and got the waiver approved. So yeah, you fit the nail on the head, Billy. I mean, there's no way you can expect Walker Eget to put up the same type of production as Darian Mensah. You just have to hope that he is a good enough. This I have problems with this term because it gets used derogatorily, and I don't think it should. You have to hope he's a good enough game manager to win you some ACC football games. The one silver lining going into next season is Duke still has Nate Shepard. They still have one of the best running backs in the ACC. He was a freshman All-American last year, like ran for 1,000 yards. He's a dynamic and explosive running back. They bring back some offensive linemen. They bring back a really good tight end in Jeremiah Hazley. But yeah, Walker Eget is going to have to kind of shoulder a large load. He's also coming off knee surgery. Like, he's not going to be doing things in the spring because he's coming off of an injury. He tore his ACL at SJSU in October of 24, played through it for that rest of that season and all last year. And then at the end of last season, hurt his MCL. So he had to get surgery to clean up both a torn ACL that he'd been playing on and then an MCL injury. So it's kind of like it's a messy situation. It's not as messy as it could have been with bringing in a guy who has at least started for a couple years on a FBS roster, but it's nowhere close to the situation Duke thought they would have on, say January 15th.
They did add Javen Nicholas out of Charlotte, a guy I watched at the high school ranks and coming up from LSU originally, and made the move. He had some success at Charlotte. It seems like one of those kind of shifty slot type of players that they can add into the fold, and they bring in some different players to kind of address the offensive line with Owen Waffle, or he's a defensive lineman, but just give us the rundown on Duke's offensive skill set, that they've put together around a Nate Shepard, around a Walter Eget. But I do like the Javen Nicholas addition there. I think maybe with Johnny Brewer and some of the fun things he can do with his offense, they'll get him involved early.
Yeah, that was a really important addition because they lost Quayshawn Brown. He was their slot guy last year who had, I don't know if he quite made it to 1,000 yards. If he didn't make it there, he was really close. He's explosive, undersized slot guy. So Duke needed another one, and they got Javen Nicholas in there, I think maybe a day after Quayshawn Brown had actually gone into the portal. So it was quick, swift portal movement. I think it was about a week into the portal. I think Javen Nicholas is a great fit for what they want to do offensively. They want to get somebody in there that they can run jet sweeps to, run some misdirection with. And that was basically Quayshawn Brown's role. They'll have, it's funny, like all this, they made all these moves before the Miami departures, and the Miami departures cast everything in a whole different light. We thought they were bringing in another Cooper Barkate with I think Javen Richardson. The name is escaping me. It was another Ivy League receiver.
Yeah, Jared.
Obviously, Cooper Barkate. Jared Richardson. Yeah. Obviously, Cooper Barkate worked out. So you bring in another Ivy League receiver, and you have high hopes for that spot. Now you just have one Ivy League receiver product because Cooper Barkate, as you said, get it down to Miami with Darian. So I think there's potential there. Yeah, it's going to be interesting though. I mean, they lose Cooper, they lose Quayshawn, they lose Angelo Anthony and Samir Hagans were both seniors whose eligibility ran out. So they're going to need some wide receivers on the outside. They had 3 of them that redshirted this past year that they're high on, but those are 3 unproven guys. So you kind of feel like if even 1 or 2 of them pan out, it's a success. And, whether that's Jamian Little, Javon Solomon, or I think it's KJ Simmons or Kayvon Simmons, one of those, they'll feel good about where they are at receiver.
Nick Del Grande, they get him from Coastal, an all-conference performer for the Sun Belt this year. That's a player that On3 and Rivals very high on. He has spent 4 years in a major college football program. He's expected to step in and start somewhere along the offensive line for Duke. And you talked about Walker and his recovery from injury and what that's going to look like. Darian Mensah was able to kind of mask some of the Duke offensive line issues that were there in pass protection at times. What's your take on just how the offensive line is looking, at least coming off of last season, and how many changes that they have from that group? Because I think I saw a couple of the guys maybe at East West Shrine Bowl and playing in that. And, there's just going to be some new faces off an offensive line that also wasn't incredible in pass pro either.
Yeah, they're going to lean pretty heavily on the center. Matt Craycraft is going to be a 3rd-year starter. They're going to bring back Micah Sahakian. He's missed most of the last 2 years with injuries, but they're still high on him and what he can be if he's healthy. They bring back Jordan Larson. He was a good addition from one of the Dakota states, and I think it was South Dakota State, but don't quote me on that. He was a starter last year. Bradley Smith kind of rotated with him at one of the guard positions, and now they kind of project as the guard starters. Like as Hakian is a swing guy. He can play guard. I think he can play tackle too. And then it's another one where, it's year 3 under Manny Diaz and this coaching staff. They're high on some of the developmental guys that kind of you haven't seen or heard of in the last 2 years because they've been, to borrow the phrase that Dave Clawson used to use at Wake Forest, they've been in the incubator, so to speak. But that's where, Duke is always going to have to be somewhat of a developmental program where you're not going out and getting transfer hauls of 30, 40, 50 guys to refill your roster every single season. You're going to have to go through the high school ranks, get some of those undersized guys and put them in the weight room for 2 years. And they'll just kind of be roster stashes that in time can develop into rotational guys and really help you win football games.
Manny Diaz's side of the ball, of course, defense. What's the Duke defense looking like following the spring portal additions, and what are some of the key position battles you're watching going into spring ball?
They're going to have to replace some significant pieces. Duke did not have a draft pick last year, and that's going to change if you just look at the defense. The guys they're losing from that side of the ball. When you know, Chandler Rivers was a 4-year starter. VJ Anthony was a 4-year starter. Wesley Williams was a pretty much 3-year starter at defensive end. Those last two are the defensive ends. They lose Aaron Hall at defensive tackle. He played great for the last 2 years, was really steady and stout inside. I mean, they've got some holes to fill. Owen Waffle, the defensive tackle from Penn State, is going to help them fill at defensive tackle. They did not bring in a defensive end. They really trust their defensive end development. When you talk about a guy like a former high 4-star in Bryce Davis, Kevin O'Connor's played a ton in the last few years. Trying to remember here. They brought in a lot in the secondary, and that was really early in the portal. I think of their first 5 transfer additions, 3 or 4 of them were DBs. They really wanted to address the fact that not only were they losing a guy like Chandler Rivers, even though he didn't play last year, you would have thought he'd be on the roster if he was coming back healthy. They lose Terry Moore to Ohio State. He was an All-American in 2024. They needed to bring in some fresh blood in the secondary, and they really did that. Keon Loud coming in from Montana is a big-time addition. They really want to create some competition back there on the back end. So not only were they losing key personnel, they also weren't very good in that department. Like they needed to improve on that in the back end, and they feel like they've done that to a certain extent. I mean, they're not bringing in the top tier transfer talent based on how we evaluate it, but that's kind of to be expected when you're dealing with a budget like Duke is.
Let's move over from your Devils Illustrated site covering the Duke Blue Devils to Deacons Illustrated covering the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. And let's first get your reaction. The news breaking on Tuesday that Steve Forbes going to be back for a 7th season at the helm of Wake Forest. I don't hate this in today's environment, but find a way to give him a little bit more resources, maybe to get some improved talent.
Yeah, it's really not a surprise that I've talked about this on my board. I've alluded to it in other things. There has been a realization that on the athletic department's behalf at Wake Forest that they're not as competitively funded within the pecking order of the ACC as they thought they were this season. When you think you're spending the top half of the league and then realize you're actually in the bottom third, that can put some things in different perspective. And that's why you realize that, you know, this roster that was put together was a missed evaluation or two away from being, you know, say 5.
We might have lost Connor there. Connor, I think I lost you for a second. Okay, so we have lost Connor for a second here. So we are going to get him back. And let me drop Connor, our friend, a text and just say, hey, sign back in and keep rolling on your Steve Forbes thoughts. And you could kind of hear Connor and what he was alluding to there with his thoughts on Wake kind of not being funded at the level of some of these other programs across the ACC, and he'll elaborate on that, I'm sure. But you do have a program that is having to deal with that and you know, is working through that. And sometimes it takes a minute. Ask Virginia Tech in football, but now Wake is going to get a chance to look at maybe how they can fix things on their basketball side of things and kind of look internally with Steve Forbes back at the helm, and then push for maybe some more of those resources to get this back on track, Connor?
Yeah. It's a program that wants to be good, but also wants to invest in football, because that's the money driver at this point in college athletics. So it's a tough spot to be in. You're splitting both ways, and if you choose one at the neglect of the other, then you're really putting all your eggs in a basket that might not pay off. If you split down the middle and try to do both, then maybe you're left a little bit with where you are right now with a 9-win football season that feels kind of good, but then you're really disappointed in the basketball season because one or two evaluations in transfer portal guys did not pay off. So it's a tough spot to be. They don't have or they do have my sympathy, not my empathy. I don't know what it's like to be in an athletic department, but it is a tough spot.
Speaking of tough spot, I think Wake Forest and the success that they had on the football field cost them a few key players in the transfer portal, similar to Duke. But I do think Wake did a good job of trying their best to kind of fill some holes in their roster and kind of what they were missing off of this team following the transfer portal departures of a Sterling Barkhalter, of a Melvin Ciani. You had, of course, who's the big defensive tackle who ended up going to Texas Tech, I believe.
Matina Barogwa.
Yeah. So you lose some of these key players on top of, Damon Claiborne going to the draft and some of these other players that have helped Wake Forest get to where they were on last year's historic run. And you bring in Gio Lopez as your starting quarterback now. They reunite him with his former offensive coordinator from South Alabama. What's your overall high-level take on Wake and their transfer portal kind of, adventure with what they had to face?
It's kind of it's all about the quarterback, right? Like you bring in Gio Lopez. If you want to make the argument that Gio should have come to Wake last year, and this should be a 2-year marriage with Rob Ezell and his former OC, I don't think you're in the wrong. It feels like there's a lot of potential there. I spent the whole season hearing about how bad Gio Lopez was, and I watched a bit of Carolina, mostly early in the season when they didn't have anything figured out, it felt like. And then I went and saw them at the end of the year. They played, I actually covered the Duke Carolina game was the one that I covered. And he made some throws and made some plays in that game where it was like, he does not suck as bad as everybody told me he does. Like, he is a decent quarterback. He's making some throws under pressure where he's about to get crushed that, like, those are some high-level college quarterback throws. I think there's something there for Wake to kind of work with and mold him back into the quarterback that he was 2 years ago, putting up ridiculous numbers at South Alabama under Rob Ezell. So I think there's something there. Wake had to basically revamp their entire receiver room because of either guys with eligibility running out or transfers out. Chris Barnes was a big time player for them last year. He transferred out. I think he wound up at Oklahoma State. It's kind of funny. Like, Wake has such a massive transfer haul. I think 30-ish guys. They've got some guys that were like big time players at big time school, like big time recruits that either didn't get much of a chance or
we might have lost Connor again. Look, everybody, I will close on this. I'll tell Connor to just do his audio. With Wake Forest and where their offense is going, I think this is where you look at what they added with, and Connor's back again with us, but the addition of a Ryan Berger, who comes over from Oregon State to shore up that interior of the offensive line. He started for the Beavers out west Obviously, the connection there with Jake Dickert as a red shirt, you get him back into a Jake Dickert program, and then you add an Ethan Callaway, who's a former highly thought of player who went out to LSU. I think Wake Forest did take a little bit of the I guess two-pronged approach of finding some players at lower levels that were able to, make the jump up to the ACC, and that's their goal, is to be, improved and do all those things at the ACC, and then also some players that were high-level prospects, and you add them into this program and you hope that they can kind of take off now. I think the offensive line is what we're all watching with the additions of Ryan Berger, Ethan Callaway, John and Yegun, adding some, I think, kind of highly thought of players to that offensive line.
Yeah, they've got to remake that entire offensive line pretty much. One or two guys like Clinton Richard has a promising future. He missed almost the whole season with a broken bone in his foot, but like Ryan Berger, I think was which one did he come from? Oregon State, I think.
Yep.
He joined there as a walk-on. So Wake gets the little added bonus of he doesn't count against the 105 as a roster spot because he's a designated student athlete. The guys carrying that tag still are kind of golden when you're looking at the portal and looking at a hard cap 105 on your roster. I asked Dickert, we had a post-spring press conference to talk about everything about it, and kind of asked what's easier, rebuilding an offensive line when you're a brand new coaching staff, or rebuilding an offensive line a year later when all of your guys left pretty much. And he talked a lot about how like they knew what they had with Falili Fa'amoe and Devin Kalani coming over from Washington State. They were familiar with those guys, and they got here and they had a starter in George Sell. They're less familiar with the guys they're bringing in, just because that they don't have the carryover guys that come with a coaching change like the two guys from Washington State did. And they started, I think Falili missed one game, so between the two of those guys, they started 25 of 26 games for Wake's offensive line last year. It's going to be tough. Like there's some gelling that has to occur both in spring football and then in fall camp.
Let's close with this. They add Sadir Mitchell. They add Bernard Causey, a couple of guys that are really intriguing. Both, Sadir being as big as he is on the defensive line. Bernard Causey, somebody I watched in high school, very intriguing corner coming from Georgia State. What do you make of some of the defensive additions that they've had, which is really was a staple of how Wake got back to relevancy this past year and took it to a whole nother level under Jake Dickert? What do you think about where the defense is heading into spring ball?
Yeah, you got to find out. I don't know. I don't know that this is Sadir Mitchell's last chance, but it feels like when you've been on two programs and got kicked off a team by Brian Kelly, your chances are running thin. And it's a really good thing if Wake gets him and he's motivated and he's a big space eater in the middle and just wreaks havoc in there. That was really the key to Wake's entire defense, was having a 4-man defensive tackle rotation last year, where they did not feel like they were losing anything if they went to option 3 and 4, whatever pairing they used, they were in good shape with. And they got to replace 2 of those guys. Mateen Ibiriga went to Texas Tech. Jaden Loving was out of eligibility. They bring 2 of them back, Zach Lahovichin and Dallas Afalava. But they've got to get other guys in there, and that's where Sadir comes in. They feel great about a linebacker addition, Vinny Ferenzi from Dayton, which is Pioneer League non-scholarship football. But they think like he's like a hybrid, extremely athletic linebacker that can play all over the field. So it's interesting. Like Wake will really lean into, we don't care where players come from. We just want them to be players. Like we want to get guys. I'm a big believer, and you can find playmakers at every single level. I mean, at this time last year, and Jake was quick to point this out in that post transfer portal presser. This time last year, we didn't even know that they'd be getting Ladarius Webb Jr. And we weren't sure what they'd get out of Karan Prunty. And Karan Prunty, for my money, was one of the best corners in the ACC, and Ladarius Webb played really, really well as the season went on. So there's confidence there in the talent that they brought in, but there's also confidence that in the next 7 to 8 months, they can get those guys to be really, really impactful players on the defensive side of the ball.
Conor O'Neill, we appreciate all the time this morning on Duke and Wake Forest. Of course, we'll have you back. March Madness rapidly approaching for the Duke Blue Devils. Hey, you got to be a part of the most watched college basketball game this season with that Duke-Michigan game. What a fun one.
Yeah, it was a fun one.
All right, Conor O'Neill, we appreciate the time, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for coming on.
Sounds good. Thanks, Billy.
There he goes, Conor O'Neill joining us. We appreciate Conor, as always, for jumping on All Access AM. Our show winding down here. Let's get to this final tidbit for you guys. And of course, this has come out on social media since Monday night when some college football coaches were in the room together at the Steve Spurrier First Year Coach Award. And Mario Cristobal had a nice little shot at Kirby Smart, which I found amusing. The video, which is about 2 minutes long, you can find it on On3's social. But Mario Cristobal talking to the crowd and kind of pumping them up in a sense, and seeing what he had to say about Kirby Smart and directing some shots his way. He said it was amazing to, quote, watch what a player like Carson Beck can do with great coaching. And of course, Georgia had Carson Beck for a couple of years there and had a lot of success with him before Miami took him to a national championship game appearance. So some fun stuff for you guys to close out this edition of All Access AM. Some good off-season talking season chirping. And we look forward to doing a lot more talking with you guys, including our friend Jerry Morphew in the chat, who says, quote, I'm excited about the SMU defense this year. Jonathan Jefferson should be dominant, along with Malcolm Alcorn Crowder. But we will have to have them ready early. That is true. SMU kicks off its season at Florida State on Labor Day night. They will have another revamped defensive line. Jonathan Jefferson coming back off of that injury that caused him to miss all of last season, but he was a really, really important piece for the Mustangs in that 2024 season at the defensive tackle spot. He'll be paired with former Big 12 starter and Kansas State defensive tackle Malcolm Alcorn Crowder, as well as a host of others on that defensive line. They've definitely addressed the depth. They'll have to be ready to go for that new look Florida State offense and Mike Norvell week 1 on Labor Day. So, Jerry, appreciate you tuning into the show on this Wednesday. We'll see you guys Thursday, bright and early, 8 to 9 a.m. Central, 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern time. Please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button for us and check out our sponsors in the podcast episode description and see what OPW Solutions can offer your business, or how you can get involved with the La La Land Foundation and what you can do to help support them and the youth of America as they transition from the foster care system into full-blown adulthood. So we appreciate all of you guys for tuning into All Access AM. We'll see you guys Thursday. Another fun show on that one. So looking forward to it, as we'll also preview this weekend of college hoops. So thanks for listening, everybody, and watching wherever you are. Hit that subscribe button, leave us a comment, a review. We appreciate all of you. This has been All Access AM. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for watching.